You know what that music means. It's time for another episode of Fin and Fire with your host, Jeff Mishler. We're going to sit down with my good friend, Patricia Edel, who runs Blue Fly Bed and Breakfast up in King Salmon, Alaska. We're going to talk about how to survive COVID, how to make it through the tough Alaskan winters, how to run a business where supply chain issues are the norm. We're also going to talk about how to catch some of the world's largest rainbows on a fly rod. So sit back and relax. Enjoy the next hour because Patricia's been doing this for over 20 years. The Fin and Fire Fly Shop is your local fly shop, available 24/7. At finandfire.com, you'll find the best selection of Simms, Sage, G. Loomis, and all your favorite brands. Well, thanks for having me here this week in King Salmon. Yeah.
I'm sure it's not been the best week you've ever had, but we've been happy to have you. I've been grateful I had a COVID buddy. Somebody to go through the ringer with.
Yeah, that was brutal.
That was, it's been a rough week, but we're both on the mend, and hopefully we don't cough too much during this little podcast.
Yeah. Well, I imagine that getting your camp set up every year is not easy. I mean, with supply issues and employment issues, I imagine that getting this place ready for fishing season is a bit of a challenge.
Yes. Yes, particularly for me because I roll right out of teaching. So I was over at UAA teaching a Alaska Native Science and Engineering program, and then I got back and I had about a week and a half to get Blue Fly ready to rock and roll for the season. So that's why we wanted your help, because you are skilled in most things that have to do with fishing, like boat rigging and gear organization and guide training and all that good stuff. And then COVID hit, so you and I are here now, scrambling through the last couple of days before the guests arrive. In 2 days, the guests arrive, but I feel pretty solid about it.
Yeah, I was feeling pretty impervious, to the idea of getting COVID. I felt like maybe I had been exposed, and so I wasn't going to get it. But then when I got it, it was like, holy moly, this is the real deal. I mean, when people say it's like the cold,
they are incorrect. They're lucky, but they're incorrect.
Yeah.
I agree. I felt totally impervious to it too, and honestly, it was off my radar because since we haven't really had too many worries with it here in King Salmon, Naknek, and the community as a whole has stayed pretty healthy, and so. Not until the season swung in, May hit, and all the commercial fishermen from all over and all the tourism people and support and everybody started flooding into the to the community. We got a really good whack of it. So and you and I just got lucky. We didn't get the cold. We got the full shebang.
Right.
So
yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, I was 2 days on my back, and I was just. I mean, I don't know if I've been so tired and so absolutely out of whack. I could barely lift my head out of the bed for a couple of days. It was really brutal.
Yep.
And if anybody says it's just the cold, I don't think they've had, the real deal. One of the things that's been fascinating to me about Blue Fly in general is your philosophy on clients and fishing and how your willingness to share this place with other people. And what I'm curious about is, how old were you when you realized that, this was something that you wanted to do? And I use that as a kind of a point of departure for this interview because, when we're 12, 13, 14 years old, we have this idea of what we're going to be when we grow up. Well, at least some of us do. And I think what's interesting is when people are realizing the dream that they had when they were 12, 13, 14 years old, and they acknowledge that, oh, wait a minute, this is what I'm supposed to be doing in my life. So I'm curious, when did you realize that this was something that you wanted to do and spend a good 20 years investing your effort into?
Well, no, when I was 12, I wanted to be a doctor or a vet or, I was not going to be a lodge owner in Alaska I mean, that didn't even really enter my radar. But as life, as life happens, you sort of look back and see how everything comes full circle, and all your little doors that are opening are leading you to one place that all of a sudden makes sense. So it's kind of hindsight 2020. But no, I came up here as a break I was going into medicine, and currently working for the Division of Wildlife in their fisheries. I got snapped up right out of college before I even graduated, really, for DOW in their fisheries education, and loved that job, and just asked my boss for some time off so I could go fish Alaska. And he was like, sure, you could have your job when you get back. So I came up guiding, and then I was like, this is pretty cool. Maybe I'll come back for another summer. So I did it again. And then finally he was like, okay, hey, you're going to owe me big time, because this is not normal that I'm letting someone go to Alaska and have fun and then come back and maintain their job. So I put off med school. I put off working at the Division of Wildlife, and ended up here in King Salmon. And just, when you're young, in your early 20s, I was, I think, 21 maybe, and you think you can look at how somebody runs their business and assess everything that they're doing, and then you're certain that you could do it way, 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 way better. So by the third season guiding up here, I was like, oh, I got this. I got this. I can do my own business. It only makes sense to do my own business. So I was very, very fortunate. I started my business super young, and there was a lot of hurdles, but it was all mine. It was, I would save up for a better boat and buy it, and save up for a better seat for my boat, or save up for a better rod and buy it. And it just went little by little by little by little. I didn't have, an investor who was investing in me or anything like that. I wanted to do everything myself. And so, I was 10 years into it before I realized, oh man, I'm committed to this. This is my path. This is my, this is what I want to do. Still in the back of my head, I had medicine. At some point I was going to come full circle and go back to med school and finish that up. But that hasn't happened. So, so here I am. So I guess to answer your question, I never really fully have decided that, this was my calling. But I certainly enjoyed the ride, and I love it. And I can't imagine myself doing anything different. So now looking back, yeah, maybe it was my calling.
Yeah. I remember when I met you, I think it was maybe your second year of running Blue Fly, and you had a photo album at this trade show of, your clients that you'd been guiding, and you had pictures of these women holding these big salmon. And I remember the boat you had at the time was kind of a barge-ish looking.
Yeah,
Remember that?
was my first ride. It was my fiberglass. Actually, a girlfriend of mine in town, her and her husband owned that. So I still see it out on the river, and it's like a warm spot in my heart. But it was a fiberglass Carolina skiff.
Yeah.
And it had a 50 Yami on the back, and with a trolling plate that I would kick down and fish for kings. And that was back in the day when kings were very plentiful, and king fishing was a huge portion of your summer guiding. So you'd start king fishing like the 15th of June and go all the way till the last day of July 31st. So that was an awesome. I still love that boat. It's super quiet. It was, it was heavy. Everybody could stand on one side of the boat and lean over to look at a king coming in, and the boat wouldn't even move. I mean, it was, I have the best memories of that boat.
I think that photograph that I have in mind is also a group of women that came up every year, and you actually...
Oh, yeah.
I was cleaning out the boat the other day, and you said, hey, keep your eye out for that little green...
Container of ashes. Well, that doesn't sound the best, but so yes, I had a group, B, Betty, and Chris. And B and Betty have passed away, and I'm not sure Chris is in Oregon still, but these three ladies came up fishing with me for, I believe, 12 years. And they started with me in their 70s. I guess they lost their husbands and became fishing buddies on an ocean charter outside of Oregon, and then decided to come up to Alaska and fish. And they wanted to go with a woman. And back then, there was two of us. There was either Nancy at Bear Trail or me. And so they they ended up fishing with me, and we bonded immediately, and they were just pumped to support the business and came back every year, and just amazing souls, and a huge inspiration to me because they're far ahead of their time. And one of them was a stunt. She did stunt flying. Like, she was a dentist, she was a sex therapist, she was a stunt pilot. Like, just cool chicks, and just so ahead of their time and inspiring to me. So that was really neat. Yeah, they fished with me for 12 years until the very last years of their life. I mean, they even were going through cancer, and they had their physical therapists doing arm strengthening so they could set their hook on their kings. Wow. So, and they didn't screw around. Like, they look like little sweet innocent ladies, and then they get in the boat and they hook a king, and it's like, boom, game on. I mean, their hook set is fierce. So super great ladies.
That's a nice way to start things too, because they were some of your, like, within a year or two of starting this.
They picked, before I'd even started my business, I think I was still guiding. I was still guiding at the Conad, I believe, and then I started my business, or either they picked up the first year of my business. I'm not sure, but like back then, I could afford just this crappy old Bronco it looked like a Flintstone ride because it didn't have the floor in it. So I'd pick people up at the airport and they'd be like, wait, I got to jump start this, and then you can climb in, and they found it so funny and humorous. And so, as the business grew, and then eventually I bought my own place, and the boats got better, the cars got nicer, the houses got bigger. So they were there for the whole thing. So I miss them tremendously. But anyway, I still have a bit of bees ashes that I'm waiting to sprinkle on a really beautiful chrome bright hen that I catch and then release. So kingfishing's been pretty crappy the last 3 years, so I haven't had that special fish or that special moment where I'm by myself to say my little goodbye to her. Yeah. So I've been carrying her around in the boat, which is just fine with her because she's down for adventures. Yeah. So
it's a great story. This year, it's obvious you spent a lot of time remodeling the cabins, and I just, because obviously we can't see Blue Fly, describe to me what went into getting, Blue Fly in this condition in this last 12 months, because you've done a lot of work here.
This winter has been insane. I always think that I'm going to clear my schedule and make this beautiful space for myself to relax and enjoy what I've done. And then within about 5 minutes, I shove that space with another monumental task. So it's been a problem for me. And I did that this winter. I was like, I'm going to have some time where I'm not teaching as much. I was still teaching, but not as much as I was. And, and then I all of a sudden decided I'm going to remodel the entire freaking B&B this winter. So, and finish a shop, a really nice dream garage shop, and build a cabin for the guides so they can be super happy. My guides are like incredibly spoiled. They have some extremely nice digs.
They do, actually.
It's
really
it's
nice
crazy,
cabins back there.
But my guides are really special, so I have to take super good care of them. So I'm trying to make them really, really happy. But anyway, that's what I took on this winter. And then my main guy, Greg Harris, who has done all my construction and built like everything beautiful at Blue Fly, got in a really bad snow machine accident after we had basically gutted everything, and got in a bad snow machine accident and had a brain injury and had to rehabilitate himself, had to learn how to walk, had to learn how to drive, had to learn how to talk. I mean, the whole thing. And so, but he, little by little, has been doing awesome, and he's back up to speed. And even though it wasn't on the time frame that I had expected the remodel to get done, everything with the help of some really good friends of mine, we all kind of came together and helped finish the inside projects. Greg finished the cabins. The shop is on the way. So the place is pretty pimp right now. It's rocking and rolling.
I agree. No, it's very comfortable. The furniture and the location is just great. I mean, you're looking out at the river every day. barbecues on the deck, and it's a really comfortable place to visit. I'm just impressed with what you've created, and then also your ability to maintain enthusiasm year after year and to keep it going, because I would think that would be, like a really...
This winter was trying.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
But now that, thanks to you and Robbie and the crew, we've been hustling, and I feel like things are in order and we're ready to accept our first fishing guest, and I feel pretty confident. And you get that excitement, okay, I'm ready, prior to that, don't even talk to me for the 2 weeks prior to the beginning of the season, because I'm just a freaking stress case, which I think you have now experienced. But it just, and once it goes and I can look back and be like, okay, everything's done. The dock isn't going to float away. The boats are solid. Our gear's dialed, and the food is in, the menu's ready, everything's ready to rock. I'm like, okay, let's do this. And I get really pumped. I'm ready.
I think that, I think it's easy for people to assume that, hey, I can do this, or this is something that I could go do when they hear stories about people, pulling these things off. But we're in Alaska, and my only point of comparison is that I was a camp director in Kamchatka, and everything was like a 5-hour helicopter to the camp. So you had to plan and had to know in advance not only what you needed, but you had to anticipate problems, and knowing that if something goes south, there's no instant fix to it. There's no instant solution. You can't just call into Esso, for example, and say, hey, we need some more beer because the clients drank all the beer. In Alaska, it's the same thing. And now compounded with all of these supply chain issues, I can imagine that planning for an entire season becomes more of a habitual process, and that you're just kind of counting on your experiences to get you through it. Is that kind of how you base...
I think, I wouldn't want to be starting a business right now in this situation with this, with this economy, with this supply chain. Right now, every business owner, no matter what profession they're in, I think is just a little bit walking on eggshells, oh shit, I hope nothing breaks, because if something breaks, we're not going to be able to replace it.
Right.
So that for me is a little nerve-wracking, especially when I'm training new rookie guides, and expecting them to screw up, because that's what you do when you're a rookie, but just hoping that those screw ups aren't so monumental that I can't replace a motor, or I can't replace rods, or I can't replace a car. So
yeah.
So,
I'm using the example of the Zerk fitting that broke in the stupid motor this week.
Right.
I was trying to grease the motor, and the Zerk fitting broke off, and it's like, well, where's a Zerk fitting in King Salmon?
Yeah.
We had to go to Napa twice to get the right one, and the boat shop didn't have it.
Right. So it's that's a great example, because the Zerk fitting is $1?
Yeah.
But going to Napa twice at $7 a gallon in a gas guzzler car, if it's a half an hour trip, round trip, 2 times, then your employee's time, then you're looking at you're looking at more, $30, $40 Zerk fittings.
Right.
So, and that's just one little bit of the puzzle. And so, the more organized you can be, of course, the more money you save. And I'm always frazzled, because you're always your own worst critic, and you always think you can do things better, and you always kick yourself for missing things that you should have caught. And so these 2 weeks leading into the season are always my man, I could do this better. Why didn't I think about this? Why didn't this get put away at the end of last season? Why did I let the guides go home without, checking the gear better, and stuff like that? So
yeah, that's what we did in Russia. My job was to linger after all the clients left and make sure that all the boats and all the equipment was winterized and put into a safe, secured location in Russia. So we had, 6 or 8 boats that we had to break down. We had to winterize them, fog the cylinders, and then make sure that nobody broke in the winter and stole the dang things, because it's Kamchatka after all. But that, in the end, was really the only way that you could roll stuff out the next year and not have a total... You know what I mean?
Yep. But you talk to your guides who have worked 5 months, and they're freezing their butts off the end of October. They haven't, seen their significant others. They are ready to get out, and
you get what you get, probably.
Yeah, and that was the inspiration for the shop too. It was just moving everything into a heated space, because last October was freezing cold, and October and November were 2 of our coldest months of the year last year. It was just freezing. So winter just hit, and it was what you could do to get your boats out of the water, your dock out of the water, and so now this year, moving forward, the shop is heated, and we have no excuses for not winterizing everything, because we have a nice warm place to organize and regroup. And you check back with me in October. We'll see.
Yeah, you might have a big screen
They'll
TV
be like,
in there.
peace out. The season's done.
Puppies
I know.
and a big screen TV.
Yeah. Oh, that you should mention that in the middle of the COVID experience, that my dog had puppies.
Yes.
So that was the silver lining on that cloud, but that was a pretty rough go of it, because
no doubt.
I have been looking forward to that for quite some time, and she finally decided to go into labor when Mom was at her absolute worst and couldn't get out of bed.
We
and
were both just sick, and the dog's having puppies.
Brutal. Yeah. So didn't have an easy labor. She had a pretty easy labor, but there were labor complications, and so that was a little stressful too for me.
It's too bad she lost a pup.
Yeah, but it's okay. It's nature. She's got 5 fat bundles of joy in there.
doubt.
So
that chocolate lab is
a chunk.
He's a bruiser. He's
a chunk.
Get out of my way. So I want to talk a little bit about the fishery here, because I think for people who've never been to King Salmon and never been on the Naknek, it's it is part of the Bristol Bay, and it is it's one of the most productive sockeye runs on the planet, if not the most productive sockeye run on the planet. But there are other fisheries here too, and particularly the trout. So I'm really curious to hear your take on what's compelling about the rainbow trout fishing here for you.
Well, so with the world's largest salmon runs, which I think the Bristol Bay is hands down right now, so with that becomes a huge amount of bioresource in the river. So you've got all sorts of things benefiting from this massive amount of food in the food chain, and everything from creatures in the river to creatures in the woods are just on steroids, because we're having these super huge runs. World's largest. Every year for the last 3 years has been the world's largest run. Now in this year, forecast again for the world's largest run. And
sockeye.
Yeah. And so what that does for the trout is food. So everything that all the creatures in the lake that are eating the sockeye eggs and the rotting sockeye flesh, and that basically the sockeye are a fertilizer for everything. And so the trout benefit from that, and they are getting tremendously huge. So last year we got 2 37-inch trout, which in 20 years, I think our largest was 35 rather. And then the year before last, we got a 36. And then last year we got 2 37s. And these are client caught fish. Those are not ones that I catch, because, I go out quite a bit too. But these are ones that clients caught, and just absolutely tremendous fish. And, that fish is 10, 12 years old. They're not like a steelhead. They're not long and lean all the way down. They have the length, but they have just as much across the shoulders. They're just insane. I mean, they're completely and utterly addictive, and they're the entire reason why I'm here.
I know. When I filmed the Skagit Master 5 sequence with you, I was just blown away by how many of these large fish you caught. And I mean, I've caught a lot of steelhead and salmon in my life, and I've caught a lot of rainbow trout, particularly in Kamchatka, but we were catching them on mice, and they'd never seen a fly before.
Yeah.
You're fishing heavily pressured water and heavily pressured fish. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think they're moving around out of the lake, and they're reestablishing position in the river depending on the food, but I was really blown away by how efficient and effective you were catching these trout. It's just like huck the big old giant ass rabbit strip fly out there and hang on, and there's another 35-incher.
Right.
Wow.
Right. Well, that's not everyone's experience.
No, I know. That's what I mean.
But we do have a lot of practice at that.
Yes,
so,
it's obvious that you do.
Yeah, so it's a pretty special place for all those reasons that you mentioned. I mean, where else can you go and have that experience? Especially a swing fishery. That's really the most special to me, is like, you just don't have to be in the boat catching these fish. You can be standing in the water, working a run, swinging a fly, and hooking these fish.
Well, it feels like there's seasons here for the trout fishing, particularly the smolt bust and the fall season. But which of those two seasons do you prefer?
Gosh, I look forward to them both. I would say they're completely different. Smolt bust is really exciting. You have to be on your game. It's the way we fish it is with poppers or floating line or just barely subsurface patterns, and you're looking for these schools of out excuse me out migrating smolt that are coming down from the lake and heading out to the ocean. So it reminds me of an ocean fishery. You're looking for birds, the terns that are working the schools, and then you kind of look below where the birds are working, and you see these trout boiling and devouring smolt. And then if you can get your shit together and get a cast right in there when that is happening, and sometimes it's a very, very small window of opportunity. You're typically, if you can get it on the plate right when they're boiling, they're not selective at that very, very moment that they're sort of boiling and in a feeding frenzy. If you can get everything together, you're going to be rewarded with a huge trout, and it's super exciting. If you can't, and they have enough time to look at what you're throwing, they're going to deny you. So the more pressure that occurs on this river, of course, the more savvy the trout are to recognizing phony food.
So if I understand right, the fish are kind of corralling the fish at the bottom, and then the smolts come to the surface, or how does that work?
There's a couple spots in the river that the smolt are really vulnerable, and there's one area at the top of the lake, and there's another at Rapids Camp. And Rapids Camp is a big, shallow shelf, and it's the Rapids Camp area. So the smolt will come across the shelf, and they will be pretty vulnerable because they're going to be only in a couple feet of water. And then the trout have a lot easier time attacking the smolt in that shallower water. And the birds have a lot easier time attacking the smolt. So you're just alerted to what's going on more because there's just... The smolt are going to be out migrating through the whole river, but your opportunity to catch them is really good in this one area of Rapids Camp.
The idea is it's just a lot shallower and they're compressed.
Everything's compressed,
yeah.
and so they also compress is the likelihood that you'll be able to see their fly.
Right.
So, or they will be able to see your fly rather. So it's just a really exciting fishery. You feel like you're almost on an ocean flat watching bird behavior, waiting for busting schools, bait fish or something.
Well, that's
like
what it
that.
reminded me of.
Yeah, it's really, really unique, and I've only seen it on this river to that degree. But you can look down in some of these busts and see just these gigantic, 28, 29, 30-inch trout just voraciously feeding. And, that is something, good luck finding that anywhere else.
Yeah.
So,
well, I was amazed about how quickly, obviously the smolt are out migrating, but how fast the bust passes you.
Yeah.
I mean, you look upriver, it's 300 yards, and it's 200 yards, and then it's 75, 50, and then it's gone.
And when they're really working, when you're really getting a lot of activity, you're going to see the birds up above you indicate, there's another school coming, and you don't have that much time. Nor do you. Sometimes you're standing in thigh deep water that's raging fast, so you don't have a lot of mobility. So you have to hope that, while the school passes you, you get the perfect cast, you have the right fly, you have all these things lined up, and then you're going to be rewarded. And so it's just really exciting. It's like it's just a very intense, high-paced fishery where you only have, a couple seconds to make a good cast and make it count. Right. So, and then the days where they're really active and there's lots of schools coming down, of course, you'll have more opportunity. And sometimes I've sat up there until, midnight waiting for 2 or 3 opportunities at busting fish. Mm-hmm. But I'd much rather be standing there, with waiting for that than fishing like a subsurface pattern in the interim, because as soon as you pick up your other rod, there comes the bus. So then you got to run back to the boat if you're by yourself and switch it out, and then you miss the whole thing and you're just pissed. So it's worth it. It's exciting. It's not for the beginner angler, that's for darn sure. It's definitely for experienced anglers, and it can be really frustrating even for experienced fishermen, because you're like, well, why aren't they taking it? Why? It was right there. And
Right.
it's always something. It's always, again, it's the chess game, a little tweak of color, light changes, the sun goes down. There's all sorts of different factors with it. And, but anyways, that is a really fun way to spend my evenings. I absolutely love doing that. That's something I look forward to every year. But then the fall, you have these trout that are, migrating into the river from the lake, and they are chasing their last opportunity to feed. So you've had all these salmon pump through Naknek River, up into Naknek Lake, up into the Brooks River system, all feeder streams all throughout this whole Katmai National Park, right? Then all those fish spawned. All those carcasses have died, and they're flushing out from the lake into our river. So the Naknek is the last stop before everything would flush into the ocean. Mm-hmm. So the trout are migratory, feeding on these, salmon, and it's their last chance to sort of devour those carcasses before they flush out into the ocean. So a lot of big fish will migrate into the Naknek, into the upper section of the Naknek in the fall. And that happens usually about, the 10th of September all the way through October. And the weather dictates how long that lasts. The water level dictates how long that goes on. So if we get a really cold frost or freeze even, I've had sometimes where I can't even launch my boat because there's ice, that will kind of shut everything down a bit faster than normal. So,
yeah,
but...
it's kind of counterintuitive, right? So they come from the lake and they come downriver, and a lot of people believe that rainbows or steelhead, they migrate from a larger body of water upriver, into the stream and this is just the opposite, because they're basically using the lake as that's where they live.
Yeah, so they don't live in the river in the wintertime, counter to what people think. There is a study, there's only been one study done on these trout. They're just really not studied enough. But there's kind of two populations. One, about 30% of the trout, they think stay in the river, but the majority of them migrate back into the lake. I don't even know if I would agree that 30% stay in the river, to tell you the truth. I think they all migrate back into the lake. That just makes sense. I mean, the fish are going to follow where the food is, and the food is in the lake in the wintertime. So, and then they migrate back into the river following food.
Yeah.
So,
I think, Kamchatka was like that. The steelhead came in, and the only reason they came in the fall was to get out of the ocean, which was you couldn't live there in the winter. They came into freshwater and found these deep tanks. And they would use that as an overwintering habitat. They'd come into the big tanks in freshwater, the ice would form over the top, and they would spend the whole winter in that deep water. And so what we waited for was the really cold weather for them to be pulled from the ocean to come into the river. And it was right before icing that the fishing was the best, because every steelhead on the planet wanted to come into the deep water and overwinter in the river. Mm-hmm. So this is that. I guess that's what I mean by it's kind of the opposite. They're still looking for deep sanctuary up in the lake, because that's where they can survive in the winter, because this river freezes.
It freezes just over the top. Of course, it doesn't freeze.
And how deep are some of the pools like 23
So you'd be surprised. So
yeah.
This river in the wintertime, it goes to about the third of its size. It's really, really
interesting.
Loses quite a bit of water. In fact, if you are able to be out here in the spring and fish the spring fishery, it's a really neat learning experience for guides, because they can see the structure, what the structure looks like when it's got a third of the water in it. And so you really learn your runs, like shawbacks, corner. What does that look like? Where are those boulders? Oh, I thought there was a boulder there, but then clearly I can see there's another pocket I didn't know about. And it's a very skinny river in the springtime.
So this is right after ice out, before there's some sort of runoff or melt from the lake or whatever you want to call it. The river,
yep. And of course the river's coming up now, because you're getting some runoff, but it's not nearly we didn't have the snow load that we normally do. So water's going to be a low water year, I think, this year in the summer, which knock on wood for.
So I want to step back a little bit. I mean, what was some of your earliest influences? What were you like as a kid?
My brother and I grew up pretty rural, in a real rural area of Jersey, right on the Jersey-Pennsylvania border along the Delaware River.
Yeah.
And we were so lucky because we had this giant, awesome playground behind us of woods and a lake. And, we grew up next to a horse farm and cows and sheep. And none of it was ours. But, we all, of course, you think it's yours because you're just a kid, and mom would open the door, and I was always in the woods. I mean, I came home from school, dropped my bags, and I went in the woods, and we built tree forts, and we just, it's my older brother. My job was to try and destroy everything he made, and vice versa, so it's kind of like that Kevin Costner movie, The War, where they have the brother and sister build tree forts, and they try and destroy them. That was sort of my brother and I. And so everything we did was like creating stuff in the woods and destroying it. We went from like hiking and mountain biking, but I had a tree fort that I built over the lake, and still to this day it's my favorite tree. It had this big beautiful branch, and I would go there, I would hang out, I would read, I would just be outside all the time. And I really looking back, that really shaped my personality. I am not comfortable unless I am in the outdoors. I don't like being inside. I get antsy if there's no windows. It's just a huge part of who I am. And I would have never thought that as a child until you start, considering different careers and movements in life that don't allow you to be outside. All of a sudden, you have that sort of aha moment where you're like, this is the most important thing to me, and this is where I find the most peace, and this is where I'm the happiest. So, again, hindsight 2020, it's no surprise that I'm doing this, because the moment I get in my boat with my coffee in the morning and I head upriver, I'm like, this is the best freaking job in the world. Like, I am so lucky. So
if people don't feel it, they'll never understand it. There's something about being the master of your domain or your vessel, and there's something about having that cup of coffee and putting the power to it and just going
and just
somewhere.
Taking the day in,
Totally.
Just your head is, people can't really talk to you over the outboard motor, so you have those 10 minutes of peace thinking about your strategy for the day and where you're going to go and what you're going to do, and just take it all in. And it's a great way to start the day.
As I get older, I tend to forget that is so important to me, because if you've done it so many times, you've been on the river and in your boat so many times, I think it's kind of easy to take those things for granted, that you do have a really interesting perspective on life that a lot of people just don't see. I mean, I feel really fortunate that I kind of grew up exactly like you. My parents would kick us out the door, and I was out with a BB gun, climbing trees and figuring it out. And I mean, if you jumped across the creek and you got wet, next time you built a bridge across the creek. I mean, there was no one there to...
There was no micromanagement.
No.
You're just a free-range child.
Totally, a free-range child. And I had these ideas and these visions that I'd created where, goose hunting in the, stubble back behind the property would be, here come the geese, and I had an 8-year-old kid with a BB gun, and the geese are coming in to land in the stubble, and I'd created all these fantasies that I ended up, realizing later in life many times over. And so I think all of that is really important for a child, but also as you get older, it became easy for me to kind of take it for granted and to just forget how incredibly unique and cool a lifestyle like this is. And I don't think kids are given the opportunity or have access to that kind of freedom like they did when we were kids. I just have to remind myself, I have to stay present and remind myself how lucky I am and how cool it is to be able to be the master of your own vessel and just be absolutely 100% in control of your destiny that day. Tell me about your dad. I know your dad has been... I've met your dad, and
My dad's a character. He's just, again, super lucky to... Both my parents are tremendous individuals. But my dad and I have had more time in my adult Well, basically, since I brought Blue Fly, that's really pulled my dad and I together. And he was guiding. He retired a little bit early and just kind of had a life-changing experience and decided that he wanted to be guiding in Alaska. So he took a job on the Togiak, which is a river a little bit west of us, and I was learning how to cut my teeth on the Naknek River. And then I got the business growing and several years into it, and I said, hey Dad, would you come help me out over here? It doesn't really make sense that we're both so close in Alaska and we're not working together. And so he did. He started guiding for me, and at first his visits were shorter, and then they would grow in length and length and length. And finally, I'm like, Dad, this is an income generating room you're taking up here, so I have to build you your own cabin. So I did. I built him his own cabin and got him his own boat, and so things came full circle for him, I think, because he had the chance to provide me with so many awesome things as a child, both my parents again, and then it was my opportunity to build him a little cabin and get him a boat, and so he can experience the river with me.
How about your mom?
Mom's awesome. She is like the most amazing human in the world, has the patience that I wish I had and the tolerance and all those. She's just tremendous. She's very supportive of my dad, very supportive of me doing really, I don't say I would think I was a black sheep child, but I definitely was living a lifestyle that they were really, nobody where I'm from did some stuff like that. And so she was always supportive of it. They, moving to Alaska, her husband, my dad, would leave for a couple months out of the year and go guide on the Togiak, and she was okay with that. And she would always make the time to come see us and visit us and check in and make sure everyone's all right. But, also knew that not to put too much pressure on us not to be here, because it was really important to us. And so my parents have a great relationship, and that is just watching them support each other in their passions in life. It has been pretty cool. It's been awesome. Yeah. So yeah,
that's great. You're very lucky.
I am. I feel very lucky. I mean, I guess you could see things in, there's positives and negatives to everything, but I choose to try and see the positives.
Yeah.
so I'm lucky.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So one of the things I think that has always fascinated me about your life up here is how you make it through the winters in Alaska. And again, I've read a couple books about people trying to make it in Alaska through the winters, and their first winter, and it's not an easy process. I to choose to live here, to choose to make this your home, requires a certain amount of, firstly, a full-on commitment to do it, but also a dependence upon the community to kind of get through it. What I've noticed and realize is that everyone knows everyone here. I mean, you know each other, and how much of those relationships, how much or how important are those relationships to getting through the winter here? Are you pretty isolated when it gets cold and snowy, or do you really kind of reach out and depend on each other?
Well, this community I love. There's only a certain type of person that would live in Alaska in the winter. And so therefore you're surrounded by people that are kind of eccentric like yourself. And you can rely on them when you need to. If my neighbors are, I rely on my neighbors a lot for stuff. If something goes wrong, people step forward. There's just a very, very, very strong sense of community when you don't have, for instance, a hospital or, just everybody kind of comes together at 50 below, things happen. Like
Stuff
you have
freezes.
to really, someone's house freezes and your friends are right there to help, or your pipes freeze or something like that. But I don't want to make it sound like people are waiting outside your door to be helpful. I mean, there is you have to be incredibly independent to live up here. Mm-hmm. And I never really thought too much about it. As I get older, I become more and more aware of you always try and prepare yourself for when things go wrong. You have to have a backup plan. You have to have your generators. You have to be completely self-sufficient a lot of ways. You have to be pretty well organized, because if it gets really cold for a long period of time, something is going to happen. You're going to lose. I sort of have a lot of separate little buildings and cabins around the property. So, were they all winterized properly? Do I have any running water lines that froze? There's been some scary times where, the power will go out and you'll be out of heat for hours. And, if you were running your heaters at a pretty low temp during the day to conserve energy, then you come home and the power's out and you're cold for the next couple hours or something like that. I mean, you just have to think ahead. Like, okay, if the power goes out and I can't use this heat source, what's my backup? Do I have a generator? Does it have fuel in it? Is it ready to go? Do I have firewood cut? Firewood's a huge one. Gotta have firewood. So I have a little firewood stove in my cabin that's been a savior. And it gets so cold sometimes the Toyo heaters that I have can't keep up. So you have to have a fire going, or there's always stuff that can happen, and it's become the normal for me, but it is definitely not other people's norm. I mean, when I go back to visit my folks, and they're living in Washington State right now on the Olympic Peninsula, when I go visit them, I'm sort of like, oh gosh, the feeling of if something happens, you can run to Home Depot to fix it. It's just like, wow, that's amazing. And you start to miss that and crave that, but then you jump in the traffic to go to Home Depot and you're like, nah, I do not want this. This is not who I am. So, there's a lot of hardships with life out here. I go cross-country skiing. I try and go cross-country skiing every day that there's snow. And sometimes I'll ski in 20 below. And I'm constantly aware of like, oh, this might not be smart, because if I fall and hurt myself at 20 below, like, who's going to find me,
You will die.
So, yeah, you're going to die. And you're in a lot of situations out here where, you don't have like sea tow to like come get your ass because you're not prepared or responsible out on the water. If you screw up here, there's a very good chance that something really tragic could happen. So you always have to be aware of emergency situations and try and be prepared for them the best you can. And when an emergency happens, especially in the summer, the community of lodges, everybody kind of looks out for each other and helps each other, and we all get through it. But the wintertime is a very special, it's a time you just cherish. It's becoming my favorite time up here, because the tourist season is rocking and rolling. You wrap up the end of October, you're exhausted. You're so grateful that the days are getting shorter and that you can just begin to relax and sleep a little bit. And like, I'm a pretty creative person, and I've always wanted to have a shop which, could afford me the opportunity to go in and have like art projects going and building projects and stuff like that. And I finally just finished building that shop. And so this year is the first chance I'm going to have to like go into it and be creative in the winter. So the winter, to me, I freaking love it. Like, we're not like crying because there's no daylight up here at all. We're just living our lives. And, by February, we have, the sun sets at 7 p.m. So it's a very short window of darkness. And it happens, obviously right around Christmas and the winter solstice. But then it's gone. Then we gain 5 minutes a day. So it's really not that bad. Yeah. We're not surrounded by mountains like Anchorage is. So we get all the low level light. I think a winter in Anchorage would probably be more difficult as far as day length, because they are surrounded by mountains and they do lose a lot of those, low level lights. We get really sunny days out here when it's cold. So you look forward to cold temps because you're going to have sunshine, and it's going to be cruising through the windows of your cabin, and it's an awesome place to take a nap. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I haven't wrapped my head around it. It is so dark and wet and rainy on the Oregon coast that whenever I'm thinking about Alaska at that time of the year, I'm thinking, well, it has to be worse.
Yeah, I think, so I lived in Seattle, I lived in Ballard, I lived in Oregon. I think those places are far worse.
In the winter.
Oh yeah, for me,
Oh, man.
because it's that dreary gray.
Yeah.
I just don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's just, I don't know, there's an element of you feel alive when you could die, if that makes any sense. When it's very cold out, your head's in the game. You're kind of kick into like a survival mode where you have to make sure all your responsibilities are lined up and you've had things taken care of, and it gives you tasks to fill your day with. I mean, it gives you chores that have to be done. Like, you can't not cut firewood because you're going to be freezing in a couple hours. So you've got to do all that stuff. And that keeps the brain very occupied and organized and gives you a sense of purpose. And so I think those are the things that are lacking from society as a whole, because, you don't have to really, you don't have to really tend to your daily needs like you do up here. I mean, you just have to make sure you have enough food put away. You have to make sure you have enough firewood.
Right.
Just those basic things. You don't need to do them in Washington or Oregon or.
I think just generally society's kind of lost its sense of I don't know. I think people in general have just gotten really used to how easy it is to access anything. And like you said, the drive to Home Depot, how easy that is to go get another package of nails that are the right length because you bought that, 3/4 inches and you need 1.5 inches.
I know.
It's like,
I know.
Really?
And I always giggle about the supply chain issues a little bit because that's our world. Like, we always have supply chain issues. So everybody's freaking out. It's like, oh, now you know how it feels to not get something you need for a couple months. But, yeah.
Well, I know that you're really interested in hunting now too. I mean, we've talked a little bit about your curiosity with big game hunting, and I think you said that this fall you're going to be going on a caribou or a moose hunt. That did you get a tag, or you drew a permit for an area for a moose or something? Tell me about that fall hunt you have coming up.
Well, I don't have it planned. All I basically did was. I fell in love with hunting this past fall, and I was trying to kind of cut my teeth in moose hunting, but also effectively run the lodge. So I would run out in my skiff, after the guests left, and I was fortunate we had enough guides so the guests would go fishing, and then I could sneak away and try and go moose hunting. But I didn't get an early start, and I couldn't hunt late, so I couldn't do the dawn to dusk, which was pretty critical with hunting. And I would go around in my skiff and hike up to places and work on my probably hideous moose call and do the best I could to like piece it all together, and made tons of mistakes along the way, but it was just a great experience. And so this year I actually am closing. My guides love hunting as much as me, if not more, because they're more lifelong hunters. I'm just a rookie. So I promised them I would close the lodge down for 3 days and we could all go moose hunting. So I'm really looking forward to that. So that way none of us have any stress of like what's going on back at the lodge and who needs to be taken care of. So we just stop and go hunting and enjoy it all together. It's going to be really awesome. So there's that going on. Then I also got applied for a tag for a caribou. That's going to be in August. So I've never shot I've never shot anything with fur at this point. So I am so green. I try. But so hopefully I'll get a caribou and then get a moose. And I'm really looking forward to hunting. I can't wait. And then duck hunting, I've done a lot of duck hunting. And I love that too. But I really want to live as much as I can, kind of a subsistence lifestyle off of things that I, catch and kill. Mm-hmm. Just mainly not because it's some glamorous romantic version of life, but just because it makes sense, because I live here and I have the opportunity to eat really well and eat things that are, incredibly healthy for you because they've had this amazing diet of tundra and berries and, And so I'm really taking time. This is a change in my life from being a sort of neurotic workaholic, lodge owner. And now I'm just like, okay, pause. You need to go berry picking for 3 days and just pick berries, because those blueberries and cranberries are loaded with antioxidants, and the best thing you could ever do for yourself, do it and enjoy it and make that part of your life. And so I've been pretty good about that the last couple of years. And now moose hunting is really important. And of course, fishing is obviously a huge part of my life. So just, getting more into that and doing more stuff for myself and my own health, making really healthy choices. I realize how fortunate I am to live up here. And if you don't take advantage of that, then you're really shortchanging yourself. Why are you freezing your ass up here in the winter if you can't be enjoying the fruits of your labor, kind of thing? You can't eat well. You can't have fun dinner parties and talk about the best way to prepare moose or caribou, or it's just it's all part of being here. Living off the land and eating the food is all part of the experience. So
that's my favorite part of fall. Fall is, after I've harvested an animal, I have an idea how I want to prepare that backstrap, and I know what the meal's going to be. It's probably going to have cranberries and sweet potatoes, and I try to cook that meat just perfectly, and then you slice it up and you put a little sauce on top of it, and then you give it to your friends, and they have a bite of it, and they say, "Oh my God, that is delicious."
Yep.
And then it kind of makes sense, for me, all of that. It's just the way I grew up, and I really look forward to that as well, because it's all part of that acquisition process, where you're just acquiring experiences, you're acquiring protein, you're acquiring stories. All of this is about you're living your life day to day, and it's those little moments where you get to share those experiences with others that kind of make it all make sense, at least for me, and it sounds like for you too.
Yep, it does, and it puts things in perspective, it grounds you, and it keeps you super, super healthy. So.
Well, there are so many other things that I could talk to you about, but I just really, really, really want to say thank you for this conversation, because the hour went by like that, and we never run out of things to talk about, it seems like, but it was nice to actually share this with other people too. So thank you, Patricia.
Thank you for having me. That was fun. I enjoyed it. Neither one of us coughed. You know that?
Yeah.
Woohoo, we're on the mend. Yeah.
I feel better already. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Fin and Fire with Jeff Mishler. I feel incredibly fortunate to have this opportunity. We can all thank Fin and Fire, the fly shop, for making this production possible. Fin and Fire is the West's leading retailer of the best fly fishing and hunting brands. If you like great service, and who doesn't, check out finandfire.com or the Fin and Fire Fly Shop located in Redmond, Oregon. Don't let the name fool you. It's an outdoor store featuring quality products for the everyday hunter and angler. To learn more about Patricia Edel and her lodge in King Salmon, Alaska, go to fishbluefly.net. That's fishbluefly.net.